So guys, I failed. I fucking hell, I messed up. So I feel like it's an appropriate conversation for us to have today, to talk about failure, talk about what it looks like, not only to yourself, but to the rest of the world as well.
Traveling to consciousness, exploring spiritual journeys to find answers in uncertainty.
So what's up, conscious monkeys? Welcome back to another episode of Catch Up With Clayton. As always, I'm your host, Clayton, and it's been over a month since I've recorded a Catch Up With Clayton episode. And quite frankly, the theme of this episode, failure, I was partially thinking that I was not going to create another one of these. Or maybe I at least didn't know if I was going to create them for a while. So what happened that is making me feel like a quote unquote failure? Well, if you're into this podcast, then you might already have remembered and noticed what happened, which was I had the idea to just put out the first hour of each episode uncut, uncensored, no ads, ad-free, to give you guys a long podcast, a long raw podcast, but I'm trying to think of how to articulate this. But then I wanted to kind of push the rest of it to try to nudge the people who were listening to the whole thing to go and buy the 5th density membership on the Traveling to Consciousness app. And this is a good plug. If you're not listening on the Traveling to Consciousness app, then what are you doing? What's going on here? Go download the app. Go listen there. I don't know why you're on any of these other platforms. Stop supporting the big guys. Let's help grow the little one, right? I digress. I bring it up because to me, it felt like I failed because now I have actually gone back and uploaded it, all of the episode, but added in ads. And so this is actually a good point that if you have listened to, if you're one of those people who likes listening to the full thing, if you've listened to episode 058, 059, 060, or 061, this is your encouragement to actually go back. And what you'll need to do is download the episode so that you can actually pull the new updated version of it, the updated one that I have pushed to the feed, which will actually be a lot longer. Except for one of them, which is another point of failure of mine. Episode 061, the guest came in and I always book them for 3 hours. I always put 3 hours on the calendar, but he came in and he sat down and he said, well, I only have an hour. Is that okay? And I felt into it, but I don't know that I fully honestly felt into the deepest feeling of if it felt right. Or maybe I was clouded with the answer. Maybe I really wanted this guest, Aaron, to come on because he's such a cool guy that I really wanted to talk to him. I really wanted to record it. I really wanted to make a podcast episode with him, that I felt like I sacrificed the integrity of the podcast to have him on, where I felt like I should have said, well, no, let's push it down the road, make it the 3-hour version and bring you on then when you have the time. Instead, I was eager. I was excited to talk with him. So I said yes. And afterwards, the next day, the next week, it kind of just didn't sit well with me. It made me feel almost like sellout energy, if that makes sense. And here's kind of that next pivot, right, of how failure looks to the rest of the world. You guys, first of all, I have no idea. I honestly have no idea if you guys thought it was cool, if you thought it was bad, if whatever. Like maybe you guys didn't even notice. And maybe I'm just airing out all of my failures to you guys. And you're like, oh, he failed? Like I didn't even notice. I saw that he was putting this stuff out like the first hour and then the rest was behind closed doors, but I didn't even notice that like all this kind of was going on behind the scenes. And I think that's the beauty of it. I think that's where the crux of this lies, which is no one knows your failures more than yourself. And to the rest of the world, it doesn't even look like a failure. It looks like testing or sampling or trying new things. So hopefully you get from this podcast that element that to the entire world, it just looks like you're testing new things. At least that's my assumption of how it probably came across. But yet to me, internally, I was like, oh, shit. Damn it. I let the conscious monkeys down. I let you guys down. Like, that's how I felt. I was like, I sacrificed the modality of having this 3-hour conversation blocked off. I sacrificed putting it all out there. And that was even a big thing after I recorded 062 with Aaron. I thought to myself, like, everyone needs to hear this. Like that podcast is like, that will put you somewhere. So go check out 062 with Aaron, because that will change you for sure. If it doesn't, then good. You're in a good place if it doesn't change you. I'll tell you that much. And the point that I bring this all up is because that was when I was like, yeah, I need to get back to that fundamental core why. And that's also a super important element, is why are you doing something? Well, my why for just putting out the first hour was to get more people to sign up for the membership on the back end. And it didn't feel resonant with the entire reason of me creating the podcast in the first place. The why for the podcast has never been about the money. It's never been about notoriety, which I feel like came with 061, or at least that's a reason I said yes to 061 with Aaron. What is the why? What is the why that you're taking into this? And so maybe that's even another good cornerstone of this, is if I can actually just sit back and say, well, the reason I brought Aaron on and said yes to 1 hour, what was the why? The why was because a part of me wanted to, it was the ego. The ego wanted that little, oh, this is a well-known guy. I do want to talk with him. And a part of me said, yeah, like other people will see this and be like, oh shit, this dude's super cool. I like him. This is so cool you had him on. And it's kind of funny I say that, because actually someone texted me last night like, oh shit, you had the Align podcast guy on. And I read that and it didn't give me the jolt that I was like that grateful. I was super grateful. I was like, yeah, he's a cool dude. But it wasn't the strength of that appreciation, or that element of him saying, oh, how cool it was to see that I had him on, wasn't as strong as me feeling like I betrayed the conscious monkeys in sticking to that 3-hour format. And again, look, I believe that I might be even just going too hard on myself, which is totally possible. But I say all of this. I go to this almost dramatic. It feels dramatic, but it's authentic. I go to this authentic place to highlight to you guys that there are probably areas in your own life, and I encourage you to examine those. Encourage you to examine places in your own life where you believe that you failed, but the outside world probably didn't see it as failure. And I know that there are different ranges of this. I'm merely talking about a podcast. But I think here's the key thing, and this is something that I think that I was kind of told a while back, but it's if you didn't learn something, then it's a failure. You can say it's failure if you already knew what you were doing and then did it anyhow. That's when it's a failure. But I see these as just mistakes. These are just, reminding myself of coming back to my why. Why am I doing this? Why is this thing happening? And by coming back to that why, I can then learn from it. Oh, okay, I didn't like this why. I don't like the intention of that why or this why. I want to release those whys and stick back down to the fundamental whys that encouraged me to start this podcast in the first place. And as I take a sip of my coffee, I actually have another example of quote unquote failure that is a little bit more macro that I'll share with you. By the way, I honestly kind of like this. Just taking a sip of coffee, coming down, recording a Catch Up with Clayton episode. Part of me kind of wants to do more of them. Just sit down and be like, oh yeah, this is the day in review. Today, this happened, that happened. I don't know. I need to figure that out. I feel like I need to get back to doing more. I need to put more on my plate. But that's something for me to figure out and outside of the realm of this conversation. So what's a more macro why that we can discuss? So for myself, not macro why, macro failure. What's a more macro failure that we can discuss? Well, I look at it in terms of myself specifically with career. And it's kind of funny. I talk about this. I'm going to be talking about this in, what will it be? In 064, we're going to talk about this a little bit more. But imagine you're climbing a mountain. Say it's Mount Everest. But say also that no one's ever climbed this mountain before, or you're not aware of what it's like to climb the mountain and you decide to do it on your own. You're climbing, it's tough, there's obstacles along the way, you're trudging along, you get to the top of this mountain, and once you're at the top, you're super excited, but then you look over to your left and you see that there's even bigger mountaintop. There's a bigger peak. There's a higher point of the mountain that you could climb. You're now faced with a question. Do you stay on this mountaintop that you got to and just enjoy the view, enjoy the luxury, the beauty of this view? Or do you climb back down the mountain? Do you decide to start at ground zero again and climb up the other mountain? You could see from the other mountaintop that it's going to be longer. It's going to be more strenuous. It's going to take more effort. But that other mountaintop, it looks like there's just a nicer view at the top of it. Well, this is exactly what I experienced whenever I quit my software engineering job. I had been studying software engineer since I was a junior in high school. Went all the way through college, $100,000 later, probably more than now I'm thinking about it, maybe like $125,000 later. I got almost to the top. I don't know how you describe the top. I suppose it's, being at Silicon Valley or some major tech company, starting your own. I guess that would be maybe a bigger top, but I was practically at the top of the software engineering mountain. And even if I wasn't at the top, I could see the top of it. I could see that there was only a couple more paths that would take me to that top of that mountain. But something in my soul looked over to the left at the mountain to my left and saw that that was a even bigger view. And what that was the podcast. That was the content creation. So many people want to be content creators. So many people want to have a next biggest podcast. But there was something about me, I guess, where I just looked over at that other mountaintop and said, yeah, it's worth it to kind of traverse this mountaintop, go down back to the bottom. There was definitely a beauty in traveling the world, but even to go back and live with your parents at the ripe age of 28, who the hell would do such a thing? Is it 28? Well, it's 27, I guess, whenever I did that. And so it's been a fascinating one, to say the least. And here we are. Here we are. I'm talking to you, and I'm climbing up that other mountain. And then this is how we tie it back into failure. Some people look at there and say, oh, well, $125,000 to a university, 10 years of programming, of learning computer science, computer engineering, programming. You're throwing that all away. It was a complete waste. Why would you do that? You stay at the top of that mountain. Don't let go. Don't resist it. Well, at some point, you got to put your hands in, you got to put your life in your own hands. Is that what you're going to do it? Is that your why? Is your why for staying at the top of that mountain was because of the journey that you went through? Not because of the view that you have, or that you could have a higher up view, or even just a different view. Doesn't even have to be quote unquote higher. I suppose it's even my own perception that this other view is higher. But to some other people who are in the software engineering realm, maybe their mountaintop of being the best software engineer they can be is the top of the mountain. That's a higher view than being a podcast host. Maybe. I can't speak for them. I can only speak for myself. And I know that getting to the top of the podcast tree, content creation mountain, that view is something that I have been desiring. It was something that called to me internally. It got me to quit my job. It put me back on the path that I believe that I chose to be on. And it's funny because I have been trying to think of how I can help people more. And I actually had an interesting dream about this. And the core essence of the dream, without going too deep into details, was basically that I need to be vulnerable. My vulnerability is what is going to help people. And so hopefully that this was an illuminating podcast, a vulnerable podcast. And I actually want to add on to this as a little teaser for 064. I want to kind of throw this in here. So think about this whenever you're kind of getting to the point of thinking about or looking at 064. Physics. I don't know. This feels like a really abrupt shift. Like, so I don't know if I want to take that much of a. Yeah, I'm going to leave it at that. It feels complete. It feels like a good, complete podcast episode. So, hope you guys are doing well. Hope you guys actually check out the link below to sign up for the meditation retreat, because that's coming up soon. We can hang out in Costa Rica. It's in a couple months, end of April 30th to May 6th. Prices will go up next month on Valentine's Day. You can sign up as a couple too, which would be super dope. We're going to do all these really cool, deep, immersive meditations that I'm very excited to show you guys. We're actually going to do some channeling to channel some aliens to come down and talk with us. So, yeah, if you think that it's crazy, well, got to be there to see it. You know what I mean? So I highly encourage everyone come check that out. We'll have a good time, good fun, exploration of what we'll be experiencing. So hopefully you guys can make it. Hopefully you guys are listening onto the official Traveling to Consciousness app, available on iOS and Google Play Store. I hope that you guys are listening to all these podcasts. I'm currently thinking about releasing them in different segments or parts, so that like the first hour of it, or every hour is released, because I feel like when people see like 1 hour, it helps them get into it a little bit more. And then they can kind of like, okay, do I want to get into this? Do I want to see this one? So let me know what you think about that. If I just made it like 1 hour or something like that. Not really sure. But that's what I'm currently thinking. I don't know. I just love talking to people. It's also probably why you guys haven't heard from me in a while, going straight back to you guys. I really enjoy just like looking at this page, and it's just all these different people I've talked to. It's a cool feeling. I mean, that's why. There's my why. So find your why, guys. Find your why. Maybe I should give you guys some homework. Ask yourself why. Why are you doing something? Because even if you ask yourself why, like, why am I don't know, man. Like, why are you going to your 9 to 5? What's your why? Be honest with yourself. Your why could be fear of missing a bill payment, could be fear of societal repercussions. And just try not to judge yourself on those whys, because I think that there's a force that's kind of helping you in this regard to figure those things out. That's totally cool. I mean, if your why is to not pay bills, I know that that can feel like a scary place to be, but understand that that's it. And then work with that energy, figure out how you can transcend that energy, because the very first step is to bring conscious awareness to your why. And then you can manipulate it. You can play around with it. You can shift it. You can move with it. You can elevate it into a different way or thought process of being, and you get to move your why. And by changing your why, you can change that mountain that you're climbing up. You can enjoy even climbing up that mountain even a little bit more. So with that being said, conscious monkeys, I will see you all in the 6th dimension.